Okay, welcome to your video to help explain the demo day presentation that you're going to give your pitch to go along with your Eng 1500 project. So what will happen on demo day, whenever it is somewhere in week 12 for you, is you will get the opportunity to give a presentation to go along with your project. And this is the pitch, okay? So very common in client scenarios and all sorts of stuff. You've been specced that you'll have a 2-minute pitch that you'll give pretty much immediately before your project is demonstrated in most cases. The idea is that you get to help explain and support your project. So the testing that we do isn't going to explore every single aspect of your project. All right, there's obviously a lot more to it, and this is your opportunity to sort of share and explain some of what you were hoping your project would do and how it's meant to work and all that extra stuff you've done behind the scenes to contextualize it for your client and get them to understand. All right. Hopefully, it allows you to talk about some awesome things in your project that maybe won't get shown explicitly through our testing. Some of the behind the scenes stuff. There is some variation between the projects. So just to sort of talk about some of them quickly, the surveying and the education pitches will actually be in the order of 10 to 15 minutes. Alex has been speaking to you about them and will continue to speak about them. You will still give a presentation, but it will be far more substantial just on the nature of your projects. Medical and software, you'll have a presentation and a demonstration, generally one immediately following the other. So I want you to still stand up and spend about 2 minutes talking to me about your problem and your solution, and then immediately sort of lead into a demonstration of your device doing its particular thing. But sometimes that line can be a bit blurry, and that's okay. Just talk to your workshop leaders about it. So having something to practice in week 11 is probably a great idea. Desal and Enviro, because your testing goes over very extended periods of time, you'll probably get all of your testing up and running, and then within the testing period, you might do your pitches. It'll be up to Simon and Juan as to how they want to run that. But for the rest, the mechs, the aeros, the civils, the robots, potentially the enviros as well, they'll all run as give presentation, immediately test. Okay, cool. So, what to put in a pitch. All right. So, what you want to do is a brief introduction to yourself and your team. Hi, I am Dylan Cuskelly and I am from Team 4. Be very clear when you introduce yourself, okay? Because your marker is possibly flipping through sheets and stuff trying to find you. You don't want to say, I'm Dylan Cuskelly from Team 4. They're gone. Sorry. You've lost them, all right? So you need to introduce yourself correctly. And clearly and kind of slowly, just for that first line. So, cool, you've got that. Then go through your interpretation of the project scope, the description of your solution, and the intended operating principles. So these may be kind of all together. They may be three separate things. However you want to do that is totally fine. But if you've interpreted the project in a particular way and thus built your solution in a particular way that's different to other people, this is your opportunity to explain that. We believed that the solution needed to last 1,000,000 years and never break and be super strong or whatever, and thus we've done this. Whereas another team might interpret it as this is a prototype, it's consumable, we cut costs at every corner, whatever. They may be two totally valid ways of interpreting the problem. Use that opportunity to express that to your client, okay? So depending on your project and your team, however you want to break these types of things up, but something around that should definitely be included. What are the expected outcomes of testing? So for most of you, it is either currently being tested or about to be tested. What's going to happen? And the more numbers you can put in that, the better. If you can say, in week 11, we tested this, it performed at this capacity, amazing. Even better again is it will perform these things really well. It will struggle with these things. If it's going to fail, it will fail here. And then if it does fail there, like, okay, you knew it was coming. Cool. So outcomes of testing, the more testing you've done beforehand, the better, or predictions you're going to make for actual testing if you haven't done it. You're also going to need to talk about costs. So the three things I want you to think about when you talk about costs is what did this one cost? So that's everything. That's all your prototyping. That's all your everything. Show me that you did some prototyping. Explain the costs of that. all the mistakes you made, warts and all. What is everything that went into this one? And then what would it cost me to make one? So your client goes out to make one. That's realizing, all right, we bought the wrong type of screws first and we used some of them, but we probably should have bought this other type instead and they would have been cheaper. All of that number is included in the first cost, but in the second cost, you just tell me buy this type of screw. What would that cost look like? That's the one that's probably most important to me. Be very aware, no mate traits whatsoever. A client does not build a business plan on the fact that you have friends. That is not how that works, okay? So if anything you got at a discount because these were friends or it was an old relationship that you'd built with somebody or somebody at Bunnings went, yeah, I'll just do a couple of cuts for you, it's fine. That is so not how it works for a company, okay? And that is not acceptable. So I want to see all the costs that it would cost me to make it. What would it cost at production? So if you had to buy a 6 meter length of something in order to implement it, then you only needed 1 meter of that material. Well, in these numbers, you got to include all the 6 meters, right? Because there's no other way to buy it. But at scale, you can divide that number by 6 because you'd be able to make 6 of them out of that. All right, or anything else that you can think of that would change as it was upscaled. Maybe some parts of this get worse. Maybe some parts of it get better. So that's up to you. Obviously, this is dependent on the project. The software project is going to be talking about server space and things like that. If it's even needed, this might be a very small section. But your design and builds around your mechanicals, your chemicals, your civils, your aerospaces, and your robots and medicals particularly. Remember, all of your sensors have a cost as well. That will be really important. Give me a conclusion or recommendations at the end. So bring it all together, sum it up. This is our solution. This is what it's going to be awesome at. I would recommend that yes, you would adopt this solution into your place, or no, I wouldn't. It is bad for these reasons. Some form of summary, or a bit of both, right? It's very good at these things, but these parts of the solution should be modified. Feel free to compare to other teams in that scenario as well. And then anything that you want to point out that makes you special. Okay, so you can do all of that and then come to the end and be like, da da da, and ours is the cheapest one that you will see this week. Cool, great. Whatever makes you awesome. If you have something that you think makes you awesome. You don't have to have something, but if you have something you want to leave me with to remember you by, that's your place to do it. Now, I would like you to include all of these things as appropriate for your project and your team and your solution, okay? So don't feel that this is some rigorous thing that you absolutely have to follow letter to letter. No, just however you want to do it, chuck all this stuff in. Feel free to give it some personality. It's your pitch. Do as you will with it. But these are some of the things that I would highly recommend covering. You can cover other stuff as well. Bear in mind, you've only got 2 minutes. So also with 2 minutes, obviously none of this is in extreme depth, right? This is a high level thing. That's all right? Cool. So, a couple of rules about how the presentation stuff will go. You will be cut off. At the end of your time, you will be told to stop, and you may be halfway through a sentence. I don't care. We have limited time for testing, and thus we have limited time for presentations, okay? So you'll be cut off. So if you get stuck on something, and you totally just mess up your description of the solution, just move on. Just ignore it and move on. We can always ask you to go back. We can always ask that as a question. Don't sit and dwell on one of these points for a minute and a half. Just move on. It's totally fine, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. Get stuck, move on, be able to sum it up in 30 seconds. Now, in your team, not everyone needs to speak. It's perfectly acceptable, and you would, as a real industry relationship, have one person whose job it is to speak most of the time. Okay, that used to be me. It's not me for my company anymore, but it was. So if anybody needed to speak, I was the one who got thrown up there, always. And that was good because it meant that was my job. I could focus on that and other people focused on other things. I'm totally happy for you to do that for this presentation. I'm also totally happy for everybody in your team to speak if you want to run it that way. And you might have really good reasons for doing that, like different people worked on different parts, or everybody wants to speak, or you want to show that you have this cool, harmonious team that works like clockwork. Like, all of these things are awesome. One person, everybody, I don't care, that's up to you. Whoever does speak should be introduced either by themselves, or even possibly better, the person who's just finishing goes, and now I'm going to hand you over to Jane Doe. That's a really nice thing to do as well. Remember, changing speakers does take a little bit of time. You will lose a second or two every time you do that. It's not big, but it is something to be mindful of. So, not everybody needs to speak. Everybody needs to be there, and anybody can be asked questions, okay? So I'm probably not going to, there will be presentation and then questions. I'm probably not going to ask that many questions to the speaker. I'm going to ask questions to the other people. And it's totally okay for you to get asked a question and go, look, wasn't my area. I focused on this instead of that, but my understanding is this, okay? So you're not allowed to throw the question. I will hold you to a response. I don't expect you to know absolutely everything, but I want to see that you can attempt to answer questions. Okay. This can provide an individual multiplier to your test mark. All right. So we can take your pitch and we can scale your test mark up and down as a result of that. So if you tell me, our project can do all of these things amazingly well, but when it hits this part of testing, it's not going to do very well for these reasons, but that wouldn't actually be a problem when you got out in service, and I agree with that. I may scale your project mark up slightly as a result. Or if there is clear disparity in a team, these two people did 99% of the work and these two people did nothing, and that becomes very obvious from the question time, then I will move marks from one group of people to the other. I have no problems doing that. Okay, so it will be an individual multiplier to your mark. It's very, very rare for somebody to lose marks as a result of this. It is almost always positive, and those people who have lost marks we generally haven't seen for quite a while, or they know nothing about what they're talking about. Cool. But it is individual, is the point that I was trying to make there. Cool. Which does mean do not answer somebody else's question, okay? So if I ask a question to a specific person, it's because I want them to answer. Just because you know the answer, you don't jump in. If I ask it to a particular question and a question to a particular person, don't get the answer I'm looking for, I'll throw it open to the rest of your team and go, does anybody else want to chime in here? If I don't do that, if I'm asking somebody specifically a question, do not answer it, okay? That is poor from a professional perspective, and it will not score you marks. Cool. You can have visuals if you want. If you want to bring something, you want to bring, a printout, a poster, a graph, a prototype is an awesome thing to bring. Anything like that, feel free. Totally happy for you to have visuals with you. Bring a poster presentation if you want to do so. Don't bring a 20 PowerPoint slide and a projector, but if you want to have a poster, fine. Don't write this out on a piece of paper though. Just don't. Don't write it and read it off a piece of paper. It's a 2-minute pitch. You should not have to write it down. Some other bits of advice flowing from that into advice are what level of formality should you have? You should be clearly prepared and you should be professional, but don't be pompous. So you don't have to walk around with a stick up your butt when you give these types of presentations. In fact, you shouldn't. You should adopt a discussion tone, okay? You shouldn't have a tone of, I am the president giving a speech. You should invite discussion and perform as a professional would. Think TED Talk, okay? That's probably the ideal tone for you to have in a pitch, is something like you see when people give a TED Talk. They're clearly an expert on their subject matter, but hopefully they don't sound too much like they got to stick up their butt, okay? This is not supposed to be a super stressful environment. It's not, all right? It's just you getting an opportunity to explain why you're awesome, okay? Don't feel that I'm going to, oh, you didn't do this in exactly this order, bad. No, it's a chance for you to explain some cool stuff to me. All right, so don't stress about it. Don't stress if you mess the order up. Don't stress if you mess some words up. I can always ask you a question. We can go back to it, okay? Yeah, so don't feel that you need to write this down, memorize it perfectly. Just talk to us about it. Also, you're addressing your class. You're not addressing your marker, okay? So if I'm sitting down the front and you speak directly to me so that I can hear you, and I know the people up the back can't, that's bad, all right? That's really, really poor form from a presentation to speak to only select people. I don't care if they're your marker or not. They're marking you on your ability to speak to a room of people, not to speak to them, okay? So talk to everybody, fill the room, own that space. That is yours. You're the king of the world at that stage, all right? Own it. Own your 2 minutes and own your space. We've kind of been over this already. You don't have to cover everything in detail. You don't have enough time to cover everything in detail. So just hit the highlights for me. If I'm curious about something specific, I'll ask you about it. All right? I'll give you the opportunity to explain that later. And probably the best piece of advice I could ever give anybody when presenting is to be honest. All right? Don't hide things from me. If it's going to fail, tell me where it's going to fail. That demonstrates that you're an exceptional engineer who understands their problem and their product really well. Trying to pull the wool over my eyes is not going to go well for you, but going, yeah, look, these are flaws. These are things that we should have done differently. This is parts of our solution that we thought were great until we saw team 2 and like, oh, they've done such a better job of this. Awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. And if I ask you some harebrained left ball question, harebrained question out of left field, I don't know. I didn't consider that. Is not the worst answer you can give. Okay. Sometimes I'm gonna ask you some weird questions. Not knowing is not the end of the world. There are some things I'm gonna ask you that I expect you to know, but other things where I'm gonna ask you weird questions just to see, and that's fine. I unfortunately I don't know. I didn't look into that. Is not the worst thing you can say. Remember, it's an opportunity for you to just describe the cool solution that you've been working on for the last 12 weeks, right? So it should be, hopefully, it'll be interesting for everybody to listen to these. Hopefully, it'll be a nice, rewarding feeling for you to be able to express all the cool stuff that you've done. And hopefully, it'll be great for me to better understand the awesomeness of your solution. So that's pretty much everything I have. If you have more questions for me, chuck them. Come to the live stream is by far the best way to do it. I imagine I'm going to get a fair few questions, both the week 11 and the week 12 live stream on this. So I think that would be the best place for me to do that. You can private message me and stuff like that as well, but hopefully I'll be able to answer a bunch of that stuff in the live stream. I'll make more videos if I need to make more videos. Awesome. That's all I got for you. We are done.